Well, it has certainly been a hot day around the area, ridiculously hot. So hot, in fact, you've never experienced it this hot in November before because we set record highs, not just for the day, but for the month of November around the area here. Hi, folks. I'm meteorologist Michael Wilhite with Southern Indiana Weather. Both Evansville and Louisville set high temperature records today. If not only just record highs for the day, but record highs for the entire month as well. Here we are, at 6:52 in the evening, and Evansville's still at 82, and Louisville's at 82, and Evansville's still at 81, all the way up to the north, and Indy's still at 75. So still some pretty significant warmth, and just really, honestly, stupid warm. This is just ridiculous. Warm. The all-time record high in Evansville, the warmest since we've been keeping records, during the month of November was 83 degrees. It made it up to 86 in Evansville today. That one's obliterated. Louisville's all-time November warm high was 84. It made it up to 85. So no one alive has ever seen this kind of warmth in November before. This is the warmest that we have ever been, and we got another day coming up in the 80s tomorrow. The way things look too, it's just this warmth is going to stick around for a while. I do see, an end to it. There's going to be a knockback. There's going to be a trough digging through, which we'll talk about here in a second. That's going to knock us down to a little bit warmer temperatures, but we're really going to be above normal for a good little while. The good news is I don't think it's going to be quite the ridiculously above normal temperatures. Here's what's going on. There's a big ridge of high pressure down here to our south, and it is firmly control over much of the country. As I put this into motion, you can see that ridge is going to continue to stick around for a while. You get a nice little cutoff low spinning down into the southwest, but some changes will come a little bit later on as we head more into the mid-month. Here you got the ridge starting to retreat back to a little bit to the west. You get a trough that's starting to dig down here for New England. But what's going to happen is every trough that comes in, it's going to progressively push the mean ridge there just a little bit further to the west with each trough that digs in. So I suspect we're going to see some bigger changes come as we head later into the month of November. Now, we're not going to see the 80s very, very much longer, thankfully. But we're still going to see some pretty warm temperatures overall for where we should be. As we continue to put this into motion, you can see we're ridged out much of the month until as we head later into the period, there's another trough that's coming down. And again, remember that first trough we saw was digging here in New England, not really affecting much of us, but notice this one, it's starting to dig down here into the central portion of the states. And look here where the ridge is pushed a little bit back more to the west. Doesn't have a better chance to affect us here in southern Indiana. And this trough starts to dig down here. And this is guided about the 10th of November. That could be potentially a little quick, but we will have to see. But as this trough digs down here, there'll be a storm system that will brew out of that. And it becomes, on the modeling here, a pretty significant little storm system that could affect the Ohio Valley here. With some rain before we get, another ridge, another little warm up, and more troughs starting to dig later into the month. Now, here's the way this works out for us on the actual surface map here. First off, we're going to have an end to this as some 80s go bye-bye, and we have some rain to deal with on Thursday. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like a significant rain event at this point for us. But we could sure use a more significant rain event. We're pretty dry around here. But unfortunately, that front back up to our west, it looks like the rain is going to stay mostly to our north, and we're going to get just a little bit out of here. I would expect we're going to get a half inch or less area wide. And some of us, if we get a half inch, are going to be lucky out of this. It's about a 40, maybe a 60% chance here of some spotty showers on Thursday. It doesn't look overly impressive to me, really, here at this point. Again, just not a significant amount of rain with it. Then high pressure sits in large and in charge. We're still going to stay on the above normal pattern. And then there's that bigger system starting to dig in as we get towards the mid-month. And there it is. And you can see this digs it into a pretty decent sized low pressure right over us. Would bring us good rain chances, at least with this run. But again, it's one run. As it gets closer to time, it may look completely different. So we'll have to see. But that would be the next decent chance for rain. And then it sort of bombs it out and makes it to a pretty decent little size snow event, but for Canada, not really for us. But notice here, on the back side of the system, it's starting to dig down some cooler weather with it, so much so that it does have some light snow showers or flurries here with it on the back side of that system. Is that possible? I suppose, but honestly, that's kind of far-fetched, especially with as warm as we are right now. I think it's probably going to be pretty hard to get snow this month, whether the models want to show it or not. Then high pressure sticks in, and we have some more opportunities as we head later in the month for some more rain, but really just not a ton of storm systems moving through. Mostly going to be more ridged out as we head later into the month. And if we look at our temperature anomalies, you can see this. Here's where we are right now, just absolute toasty around the area, and we're going to stay toasty for a good little while. There's the trough digging down later this weekend into the northeast. That might affect us just a little bit, but not for long, as you see the toasty temperatures pretty much just come back until later on as we head in towards mid-month. That's whenever these bluer, the cooler temperatures start to expand. In fact, as we head into the mid-month, most of the eastern half of the country, a complete pattern change into a cooler than normal pattern here. We're talking 10 or 15 degrees, even potentially below normal here. So that would certainly be a bigger shift. In fact, the latest data here is suggesting we could reach into the upper 20s, even potentially for our lows around the morning of the 14th. Again, we take that with an extreme grain of salt because the models have consistently shown at least every once in a while, maybe not consistently, but every once in a while the models have shown us getting into the lower 30s and having frost territory around here, and they have yet to materialize. So this far out, we'll see at this point. The more likely scenario is that this becomes a pretty decent sized trough, but you've got a pretty strong Pacific jet still roaring in, bringing with it that more mild air. What would be more likely as we end up in the 30s and 40s, probably not any 20s and probably not any snow with it. That's my take on it at this point. Of course, if anything changes, well, we can deal with that when we get there. But I'm a little skeptical of what the modeling is showing right now. But definitely some changes to a much cooler pattern as we head the later on into the month. Of course, that would be welcomed. We're 25 degrees or so above normal where we should be this time of the year today with these record highs. Now, there are some other indices that are showing these changes, and we've been in a positive PNA, a Pacific North American pattern here for a little while. And typically when you have a positive PNA, that means that you have a trough in the east and a ridge in the west, but not always. Not always. It just depends on where that trough is positioned. And we've seen quite a few troughs roll through. A lot of them have been rolling through New England, though, rather than this. That's still positive PNA. We got that working in our favor. It stays pretty much positive here. As we look at the Arctic Oscillation, the Arctic Oscillation has been consistently negative here all the way from October onward. Now, that's a good winter look. Whenever we have a positive PNA and a negative AO, that's a pretty good winter look for colder temperatures. Well, why have we not been having winter temperatures? Well, it takes more than just these two to get the sustained cold and the cooler weather coming over us. That's just be very simplifying it if you made it to these indices. There are other things that are working against these as well, La Nina being a chief one of that as well, but also the North Atlantic Oscillation not allowing any blocking coming through. We've been positive for most of the time. That's when you have a negative NAO, a negative North Atlantic Oscillation. What this does is it essentially puts a Greenland block, high pressure up around Greenland, and that sort of puts a roadblock in things where it slows down storm systems, and you can get more of that cold funneled down over us. Now, the indices here is suggesting that we go down into the negative after this. So there are some hints. We get that positive PNA still, continue with a negative AO, and we end up with a negative NAO. Yeah, the indices are pointing to what we could see later in this month with a little bit more of a cool down could happen. Do we get down into the 20s? Do we get any snow with it? I'm still, as I said, extremely skeptical of that at this point. We will have to see. It does have some more support than just these indices. The Bering Sea rule gives it a little bit of support. It brings trough starting to dig down into the western portion of the country here around the 14th and 15th, and then as you move on in time, here you go about the 16th and 17th, and here's the 18th and 19th, and it's giving you, a pretty trothy look for us with this sustained, what could potentially lead to more of a sustained cool down. By the way, if you're interested in these maps, you can always go to organicforecasting.com. You can learn a little bit more about the Bering Sea rule there and pretty much what it is. The founders there put a lot of work and a lot of hard work into this Bering Sea rule. It's not something I use necessarily all the time. It's not always right. It does have a pretty good track record, but it is what it is. It's a tool. It's one of many tools that I use in the long range forecasting, and it's a pretty good one to have in the toolbox. So you can check that out if you're a little bit, if you're more of a weather nerd, wanting to get a little bit more of an interest in that. I suggest that website there. Go learn a little bit about it. But that indice is pointing to what could be, it's pointing the signal for another cool down as we head into the mid-month. So what this is saying essentially is the back half of November going to be much different than the first half of November. It's not the only thing. If we look at the Southern Oscillation Index, you can see that some changes there as well. This is the daily change right here. And if we back up to about the 25th, notice how it goes from a 4 to a -1. The next day it's -21. The next day it's -35. When you get just an extreme drop like that, it's indicating that big changes are on the way. And again, if you go to organicforecasting.com, that website also does indicate for you a little bit about the Southern Oscillation Index, the SOI change. You could read a little bit about there if you're more interested in it as well. But again, the idea here is if you have such a large jump in the negative direction, that spells a pattern change as you head down, 15, 20 days later or something like that. And this would again spell that if, with such a sudden change in this time frame, puts it into mid-November again. So there's yet one more indice suggesting that some changes could be on the way. We could look at the recurring Rossby wave train as well, also from organicforecasting.com. And you may not hear a lot of meteorologists talking about these because they are somewhat controversial, by the way. They're controversial only in the sense that they've not been tested for long periods of time. So whenever I went to the university and I obtained my degree in meteorology, we were taught some very time-tested methods for being able to forecast both in the short and the long term. None of these methods were taught, and the reason why a lot of meteorologists are a little leery of this is because they've not been time tested yet. But just because they've not had a lengthy amount of time to be tested doesn't necessarily mean that they are invalid. These are things that the owners there of organicforecasting.com are testing out, doing some very scientific analysis on it, and it's really benefiting the meteorological community. I particularly like them. Are they spot on all the time? No, but is anything spot on all the time? Again, this is just another tool in the toolbox that we can use to help us. And whenever we see not just one or two, but all of these things starting to line up, that's when we can gain a little bit more confidence to help us to see, that what the modeling is showing could be right. Doesn't mean the modeling's position of everything is right, but it gives us a hint of what we're seeing. That volatility in the modeling is certainly coming. And you see that in the recurring Rossby wave train there as well. These are your precipitation chances. And you can see right about that time frame, you got pretty good chances of precipitation coming here into the Louisville, southern Indiana area here as well. So multiple sources suggesting that there's a shakeup coming as we head a little bit later on into the month. Now, I'll show you a little bit more about this at another time. The recurring Rossby wave train takes us all the way out, even through the winter, and does some snow forecasting and temperature forecasting with it as well. I'm still reviewing some of that data, and we'll look at that in our final winter forecast, by the way, which comes out on Saturday. May even have it out on Friday night if everything goes right. All right. There is even the CFS. Just wanted to show you the CFS, even seeing that warmth eroding as we head later into the month as well. Again, the CFS not showing a whole lot of the blues here, but this is a multiple day average here rather than just one. And you can see it certainly has cooled it down considerably from where it was at the beginning of the month. Honestly, that's about as good as you get on the CFS. It's usually a pretty warm biased model. As far as the La Nina is concerned, just really quickly with this, we're getting stronger. Actually, latest value is -1.1. That's in moderate La Nina territory at this point. So we've been consistently, whether it may not officially be a La Nina in term at this point, but it's a La Nina. That's the way it's acting, and that's the way the atmosphere is certainly responding. And it's forecasted pretty much to stay this way. The latest modeling here indicates that we stay here firmly into this weak La Nina category until winter's starting to let up here in about February and March, before we're starting to come back to the neutral territory. So get used to this. This means more of the battle is going to be on the way here. There is your La Nina here, and you can see you can see some pretty good waves action here going on with this, some upwelling of that cooler water, and it's certainly caused it to strengthen just a little bit. Also see up here your PDO is starting to weaken a little bit. If we look at our 7-day temperature change map, you notice a lot of cooling going on up here in this region. Again, there's what we are currently at with our anomaly. Here's your temperature change. Notice a lot of cooling going on there. That does not mean that this is going to go away. I still think we're going to have mostly a pretty, this warm blob's going to stay there through the winter. I really do believe. If I were to show you the subsurface temperatures, what you see is there's a lot of warm water here below the subsurface, which means even though this is going to cool, it's only going to be temporary. That warm water is going to upwell again, and I do believe you'll see some strengthening with this. For right now, though, this PDO in the warm phase is something we normally don't see with a La Nina. These are battling each other out. As this gets stronger, this is going to get weaker. As this upwells and becomes stronger once again with that subsurface water rising, I expect this will probably get weaker. It's going to be a back and forth relationship between that two, and that's going to spell volatility. And by the way, this is why we're having such a warm fall, is from this right here. Yes, that will have some major implications on us this winter. I'll discuss that a little bit more as we head into the winter forecast, which, by the way, you can go ahead to southernindianaweather.com and you can read my preliminary winter forecast if you want. But again, my final winter forecast will come out by Saturday, probably on Friday evening, but Saturday morning at the latest. And there will be a few changes that I have made to this. I gave some forecast maps and thoughts here. I have updated these with some new graphics and some updated thoughts as far as what I expect for temperature, snowfall, and the like. So be sure you check back here later in the week for that. All right, so volatile period coming up, folks. Right now, it's going to be warm, warm, warm. It's going to stay warm for a little while, and it doesn't really look like we're going to, it doesn't really look to me like we're going to go much here into the cool anytime soon. As I just sort of back this up here, we'll take this look, and you see some 60s and 70s here still dominating the period as we go over the next few days. And of course, that's cooler than the 80s, but it's going to be later in the month before we start to see some of these bigger changes. And right now, our normal temperature, should be near 60 degrees or even into the 50s over much of the area. So anything above that is going to be above normal. I'd look for an above normal month overall with pattern changes as we head later into the month. But again, probably, even though the modeling is wanting to hint at these cold blasts coming in as we head into the mid-month, still skeptical of it being this extreme this far south. We'll have to see. It's always possible that this could be right, but I think I would err more on the side of it being wrong at this point. We've seen the models suggest it come this far too, but La Nina's had a lot to say about it, and it's never been quite as radical as what it has suggested the past couple of months so far. So still think November overall is going to be pretty warm, but I think we're going to see at least a little bit of a cooler pattern, especially as we get into the mid-month. All right, a volatile month ahead in the temperature department. Enjoy those 80s if you're a warm fan while they last, because they're not going to last long. 60s and 70s, though, unfortunately, look like they're going to dominate the next little while. I'll have another update for you later in the week when we do our winter forecast. Check back.